Welcome back to Bounce and Bubbles. I'm Amy.
And I'm Shannon, and we are so glad that you're here. Last month, we talked about noticing. Remember, we talked about like noticing what our bodies was telling us, what our thoughts were telling us, what our emotions, and then really noticing the deeper part of ourselves that may have gotten quiet over time. This month, we've been talking about what happens after the awareness.
And this month has been mostly about choosing how we respond. We started with the body, then we moved to the mind, then the heart. And today we're moving into the spirit.
Yes, Amy, this is part of my favorite part. And it just feels like the right place to land right now. Because when we talk about spirit, we're not talking about having all the answers or forcing ourselves into some perfect shape or a state of peace. We're really talking about the part of us that remembers our humanity. And that's the part of us that can make room for grace.
I love that word.
I do too.
I'm just not sure I use it with myself enough.
Yeah. And that we're going to get into that, right? We're going to get into that. So, it's really talking about and understanding the part of us that knows that we are more than what we accomplish. We are more than how well we perform or how we hold everything together.
Exactly. And today's conversation is called Self-Compassion is Strength, offering yourself the same grace that you give to everyone else.
I love it. So, yes. Yeah.
We can show grace to our children, our partners, our friends, our clients, our coworkers, and even strangers. We understand their hard days, right? We understand their learning curves. We understand their exhaustion, and we also understand their humanity.
Yes. But what happens when it comes to ourselves? That same compassion can be a lot harder to access, right? It can be a lot harder. And that's really what we want to talk about today. We're not talking about self-compassion to use as an excuse or to avoid taking responsibility, and it's not even about letting ourselves off the hook, but self-compassion as a spiritual strength. What does that mean? And it's the ability to really meet ourselves where we're at with honesty, grace, support, and care, just like we would extend to those that we love, our friends and our family. And we're going to start talking about how do we extend that to ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. I think this is a good time to have a little grace cocktail.
Absolutely. So this is our little mocktail pause.
That's right.
And it is so good.
We keep getting better at these mocktails. So before we jump in we are going to take our little mocktail pause. And if you're able to grab something to sip on and settle in, this week's mocktail is our lavender pear Grace Fizz. Of course, we add a little glitter because that's just how we are. But it is soft, sweet, very light, very floral, and very refreshing. Lavender has this very calming quality, and pear, it's delicious, brings a gentle sweetness that feels comforting without being heavy.
Yes, and it is so delicious. It is so good. It feels, I wish we could give you the taste through the screen because it really feels like the perfect sip for this episode, because grace doesn't always arrive with some huge dramatic moment. It doesn't just arrive. Sometimes grace is really quiet and subtle. And sometimes it's really simply choosing not to be so hard on ourselves.
That's very true. And you can find the recipe in this week's companion resource in the link below. Go ahead and pause us if you'd like to make one, and we'll be right here waiting on you.
Absolutely. It's so good. So we're going to take a look at how we are often so much more compassionate towards others than ourselves.
I think what's interesting is that most of us don't have a compassion problem. We know how to be compassionate. We just don't always know how to offer it to ourselves.
Yeah, I believe so too. And I think, women in general are really, really passionate. Well, we're passionate, but we're also compassionate, right? I think we generally have that nurturing, taking care of others that just comes really innate to who we are as women. And, we don't hesitate at all to ever comfort people when they're tired or when they're needing something or when they're, struggling, grieving, whatever it might be. We really tend to show up.
Yes, you're correct. A lot of times, we explore how we often respond to others with patience, perspective, and grace. But when we respond to ourselves, it's generally with criticism and pressure. And so I think some possible points that we could just explore today naturally might be that, like we talked about, we are always good at comforting others. We remind ourselves that other people are human. We encourage others to rest, regroup, and try again. I mean, we do that all the time.
All the
We're
time.
always empowering other people,
Mhm.
right? And so I definitely think today is a great time for us to start thinking about having grace with ourselves, and that we can see the full picture for everybody else. And now let's look at ourselves to find the full picture.
Yeah. And I'm curious about, we do tend to be so hard on ourselves. And it's like, I wonder why when we don't meet the mark that we put in our heads, why we look at as failure.
I think that's a great question. I think you and I have been talking a lot about the past 2 weeks, how crazy busy they've been, right?
Yeah.
And why are they crazy busy? Because we're taking care of everybody else.
And everything else.
I mean, literally, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's why are they crazy busy? And so we talk a lot about just also having the ability to think through that. And I love that part of this podcast is, and we're going to talk about this in the next episode, which is exciting, what we're getting out of these podcasts. So I love that. But yes, I think we just need to learn to really give ourselves a little bit more grace in the time that we're also spending giving grace to others.
Yeah, I agree. And I think just one more thought about the failure piece is, who sets the bar?
Good question.
Who sets the bar? Because we're obviously have a tendency to measure ourselves against this imaginary bar. And it's like, I think it's important to explore, like, who sets it? Where does that come from?
It's so true.
What's the messaging that we're either giving ourselves or we've received over our years, or a combination?
I'll give a great example. And this is not every person, but we have some birthdays coming up. And I just find it interesting, like, who's in charge of the birthday celebrations? Generally, I'm not saying for everybody, but generally the moms are out there getting the decorations, the cookies, the theme. But that's a great question. Like, why is that? Why is it like that?
Yeah. I think it's definitely roles, cultural roles for one thing. And I don't know, is there maybe a little bit of just awareness that if it's going to happen, it's because I'm going to make it happen?
Well, or we sometimes are very controlling and want it a certain way, because if the guys did do it, it might just be pizza and a cake.
But they'd be very happy with that.
That's what's great, though. Like, as a female, our expectations for ourselves are just so high.
They are.
The men don't put it on us, like, when it comes to that type of thing. So yeah, again, these are such great conversations.
Yeah. I love it. My husband handed me a gift certificate to get my nails done. So at least he was thinking.
Wow.
So, yeah, for my birthday.
That's awesome.
I'm like, you're so sweet.
You need to put a gold star
I know.
on the fridge. Shout out.
Yeah. That was so great. So, and I also think another part of that then, to that failure piece, is then how do we talk to ourselves? Because recognizing how we talk to others, if our kids make a mistake or they feel like they're behind, or, they're just having a hard day, or our significant others, friends, we speak to them encouragingly and lovingly and supportive, and, try to be uplifting and stuff. And we don't always talk to ourselves that same way, I don't think.
Definitely not. I had a friend yesterday that we were talking on the phone, and it was adorable because she was like, I spend so much time, I feel like, taking care of everyone else. She goes, but, like, who's taking care of me? And I said, well, you need to take care of you, and you need to listen to our podcast. That's what I said. I said, you have got to take care of yourself.
Yes. Yeah. So, you have to create that space to take care of yourself.
Right? And you also have to give yourself enough love that you're worth taking care of yourself.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
And a lot of women really don't always do
I think
that.
That's really hard sometimes. I think like you said earlier, we're not short of compassion. We just rarely include in the circle of care that we offer everybody else. We rarely include ourselves.
That's so true.
Yeah.
For sure. So we know that we can also be very gentle with someone else's humanity and so impatient with our own. So let's talk about self compassion is not an excuse. We're not saying that having self compassion is giving you excuse to not do things or not get
Yes.
things done. But I think one reason people resist self compassion is because they worry it means letting themselves off the hook, which we seldom let ourselves off the hook. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think we could go down a really deep surfacing of that, of like, why do we feel like if we give ourselves that compassion or we give ourselves that moment to stop and nurture a need that we have or something like that, where does that belief come from that we're letting ourselves off the hook? Where does it come from that because we need that we're not capable? And I think that that's an important place. Obviously, we wouldn't go super deep here just between you and I, but I think that's something for women to think about. Like, whose messaging do I have? So my grandparents were in the Depression, but they were very poor, growing up and stuff like that. And my grandmother, all 4 foot, 11 inches of her, was one of the hardest workers I've ever seen in my life. I mean, up until her late 80s, she was up first thing in the morning. She used to wake me up super early when I stayed with her, time to dust. And she just worked nonstop. She was a school teacher. They had a garden. She canned, she cooked, they rarely went out to eat ever. And she just worked from dusk till dawn. And you wonder how that messaging translates down through the generations, because my house wasn't super spotless or if I wasn't up from dusk to dawn, and that's not how I'm wired. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you right here. That is not how I'm wired. Um, but there's a layer of belief or guilt or something that I should be doing it this way. So I think it's important to kind of question where that messaging comes from.
And I like that you talk about the history part of it because, you think about women went into work areas when the wars happened
Yeah.
because the men were off. And so the women had to take over some of those responsibilities. And I think we just have continued that, right? Like we've just continued that. Well, then on top of that, you still had the responsibilities of the children and the house. And so that's just continued through, I guess, history. And not to say that men haven't picked up any responsibilities because they have too. I mean, I know there's so many men out there that are taking on a lot more responsibility with the kids and then even cooking. I mean, there's a lot of men these days that are taking the responsibility of meals and cooking. It just seems as though as history's gone on, men and females have kind of taken on different roles, but theoretically speaking, women kind of hang on to the mental load. I don't know. Maybe I could be wrong. I'm not saying I could be wrong. I'm not a man, but it seems like we take on a large mental load.
Well, if we will go back to one of our first episodes, right, we talked about the difference between women's brain and men's brain, right?
Yes.
So guys really think about pretty much one thing at a time, unless they've got super, they got something really big going on. They do tend to stay more focused, where we're like this mess, right? We're like, over here, over here, over here. I was on my computer yesterday doing some work, and I swear I had like 10 tabs open. One was looking at living room furniture. One was working on our work. One was working on a proposal that I was creating. Right. I mean, it seemed like none of them were connected and they were all open. And I was like,
and you could do it no problem.
I was going back. Well, yeah. I mean, I think we tell ourselves we can do it with no problem, but then it's like 4 hours later and you're like, what did I accomplish? How did I get that one thing done? Yeah. So I do think that we tend to diversify our thinking paths a lot as women.
Have you ever sat down, like you're in a room with a man and they can just literally fall asleep? Or you can say, what are you thinking about? And they're like,
nothing.
Or, I mean, I don't know about you, but like if I'm watching a football game, I truly have other thoughts going on. But I'm not sure that a man is watching a football game thinking about 500 other things.
Yeah.
I just would love to just see what it's like for a day. And if we could just get the perspective,
Mhm.
and if they could have the perspective of what goes on in our mind, I
Yeah.
can't imagine.
So this is a perfect example because we're talking about self-compassion and giving ourselves grace. And now we're talking about how does a man think? That's so funny. So, when we look at self-compassion and thinking about what it is, self-compassion doesn't say that it doesn't matter because we know that a lot of stuff matters. Self-compassion says it matters and I can meet myself with grace while I grow. So, thinking about that, I think it's really important to think, self-compassion is not about denial. It's not, Pollyanna. It's not the world is so rosy and everything. It's just really recognizing that, yes, I have responsibilities, or yes, that really hurt, or I'm not making an excuse, but I'm just recognizing that something's there and I need to hold that with the same love and compare that I would hold for other people.
I have one saying that I've kind of started using, and it's kind of nice. You feel free to steal it if you want, but sometimes I'll just say to myself, I do not have the capacity right now to take
Mhm.
that on. And
Mhm.
when I say that, it doesn't mean that I'm getting out of doing it. It's that I have so much other things going on that I have to recognize that my capacity at some point has a limit. Right.
Yes.
And so for whatever reason, when I say I don't have the capacity, it feels better that I'm not saying, well, I just don't want to do it or I can't do it. It's that
Mhm.
I don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah, that's a real
Mhm.
tangible image that you can give to someone. I don't have the capacity, right? Containers
Right,
only
right.
hold so much until they start to overflow.
Yes,
I know that a lot of women for all ages have been listening to our podcast, which is really exciting because we really started out thinking about talking to women in our age group. But there's also that piece of, there's that piece of giving ourselves space when we're growing. And you think about this, Amy, how much do you feel like you've grown even just in the last year?
oh, tremendously,
Yeah.
tremendously. And I was talking to my sister yesterday, and I was just talking about how, like, when I go to work, sometimes I work with a lot of different aged people. And I'll look at, like a 35, 30-year-old, and I think to myself, the way they come into the workplace is completely different than the way I, as a 55-year-old woman, come into the workplace.
Yeah.
I'm not and when I say that, because it's life experience.
Hmm.
Like, nothing replaces a life experience until you go through it to realize, maybe certain things are important or not. And, at different ages, you're trying to build your career, whereas at my age, it could be that my career is built. And so there's just a lot of different things that different angles to look at it from,
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. And I really think that as I work with women who are in our age group, and I am a little bit older than you, but I find that a lot of women, coming out of their 50s into their 60s are really saying, what's next?
Definitely.
What's next? What do I want now for my life? Because I know where I'm at. I'm not ready to stop yet, right? I'm not ready to just hang it up. Um, and I'm like, what's next for me in this? What does this look like in my relationships? What does it look like for me personally? What does it look like putting myself out into the world? So I think that there's that piece there that you said comes with experience, but I feel like a lot of people feel they should get into this generation and have it figured out or be complete. And I'm really finding that it's not even just not true for me, but it's true for many women that I talk to.
For sure.
Yeah. So when you tell people I don't have the capacity for that, what emotions come up for you when you say that?
I think when I first started doing it, I felt a little guilty,
Hmm.
but now it's so freeing.
Yeah.
It's so freeing.
I love that.
So,
So what
yes,
was that shift for you? What took it from being like feeling like guilt to now going, no, it's okay for me to say this and tell the truth?
I think the word capacity for me was exactly what you just said. There is only so much that can fit in this bucket.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that I also really started thinking about doing things really well and being more present. Again, I think that has something to do with our age.
Yeah.
To just that you kind of see you're in the back nine of life and you're like, wherever my feet are, I want to be in that space. Whereas when I was younger, I don't think that I was always truly present. And if I could go back, that would probably be a few things, that I would say to myself is the time goes so fast.
Yeah.
But now I know that. And so now I'm being more present.
Yeah.
So it's never too late to learn.
Well, kind of like setting priorities, right?
Right.
And we both talked about being single moms, and honestly, those years were nothing but survival.
Ooh.
Nothing but survival, So how are you present when you're trying to survive?
Working multiple jobs.
Yeah.
Providing opportunities for them in sports and school and pickup and drop off and meals. And yes, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think survival is a pretty good way to say that. And there's so many women out there that are in survival mode and not even just single moms.
Yeah.
People that are having to take care of their parents and their children. And then there's even people that like our age, which are caretakers for grandchildren. And I mean like full-time caretakers. Thankfully, that's not me. Thankfully, I do get to choose when I hang out. But there are a lot of people who they are jumping in and helping their family as the grandparent to help raise the kids. And they have to. Today's society is tough.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really
There's
tough
a lot
out there.
going on. Yeah.
Sure.
You're making me laugh because my son just had his birthday and my daughter-in-law did a dinner with some friends and stuff like that. And she had actually asked me before we went, she said, hey, do you think after we get done eating, they're down in the stockyards, right? So do you think after we get done eating, do you mind going and relieving the babysitter? Because she has a curfew. So Josh and I can stay out longer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I had just come off of a week of travel, like literally the day before. And so I said, so exactly how late are you thinking?
Yeah.
And of course, I didn't even get over there till 10:30. And then Josh sends me a text around, I don't know, 11:30 or so and said, hey mom, we're having such a great time. Do you think we can stay out? And I'm like, what are you thinking? And I have to tell you that this whole time, my 3-year-old grandson was wide awake.
I don't doubt that.
He is just sitting there wide awake and talking to me and stuff. And I said, I need to be home and in bed no later than 2. And I was,
that's pretty generous.
That was generous, right? I was thinking like midnight.
Yeah,
right?
So generous too.
So they ended up getting home a little bit after. So I got home right before 3 and I'm like, I was wrecked, but I gave myself a lot of compassion that next day. I made it okay that it was okay for me to just let my body rest, veg. I didn't put any demands on myself to have to get something completed. I was able to take care of my son and daughter-in-law and let them have some time out and spend time with my grandkids. One was sleeping, but the 3-year-old was awake. And I gave myself that space the next day without giving myself any guilt. Oh, I should be doing this. I should finish that. That kind of thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they had a great time. They probably needed it.
Yeah, they do. Well, they're young parents, right? So that, that they do for sure.
I love that now at our age, our children have to ask us now if they can go out. I think it's hilarious that they're like, it's almost like.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's so funny. That's so funny. I love that. So, so we really want to hit that self-compassion isn't about removing responsibility. It really changes how we choose to carry that responsibility. Okay. So, Amy, I think one of the really important places is what is that inner voice that we hear? And one of the places that self-compassion really shows up clearly is in the way we talk to ourselves. How do we do that? In episode 6, when we were talking about the mind and we talked about changing that conversation, right? Not letting the mind just get going and say whatever it wants to say, but really directing it. And so in this episode, we're really talking about what's that posture that we are going to take towards ourselves. What can we do with that?
And I think it's important to note that one thing that I would really challenge anyone listening right now to the podcast is to really notice the conversation, how you speak to yourself.
Yeah.
An example could be the house is a wreck. I just need to do a better. But you have to really And I will find myself sometimes saying some negative things in my head,
Mm-hmm.
and that I have to really kind of take a step back and think to myself, no one else is saying those negative thoughts to me.
Right.
That's me saying the negative thoughts. And so then I have to reframe my mind to say it in a different way, because I think we all are guilty of being negative towards ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But we are also in control, like we've talked in the podcast, we are in control of the thoughts and the way that we do allow ourselves to accept those thoughts, those feelings, and those words. So,
Yeah. This is really kind of hitting me with what you just said. Cause yeah, we will talk like negative external, like you said, my house is a mess. I didn't
mhm,
get this job done or this task
mhm,
done. I should have done that. And I also think going a layer deeper is how we talk about ourselves to ourselves. So, if we're not where we want to be physically, maybe we're carrying a little extra fluff around, or maybe we haven't been exercising like we should,
mhm.
or maybe we're starting to see changes on our face. We're looking at that. And sometimes we can say the meanest things to ourselves.
Very.
Really. And it's like, we really have to stop and ask ourselves, is this the way I want to treat myself?
Mhm.
I wouldn't say this to my best friend
Or your daughter
or
or
your
your
dog. Yeah.
granddaughter. You just wouldn't you wouldn't say, or I
Yeah.
mean, grandson, son, depending on what it is, right? But like, yeah, you just wouldn't. Um, Now, sometimes I
Yeah.
will say in relationships, we say some mean things, but that's whole different segment. We'll talk about that in a different one, right?
So I think a lot of us have an inner voice that can be pretty hard on ourselves. You need to lose this 10 pounds, or you need to do this, or you need to, kind of like a drill sergeant. Maybe there's a belief there that that's going to hold us accountable. Being a little more strict or a little meaner to ourselves is going to hold us accountable. And I don't really think that that's the result that happens when we do that. I think it's really true, Amy, that sometimes the voice in our head can really start to make things worse than maybe they are. We kind of get that tunnel vision, we kind of get that focus. And when we're in that space, we could get into all kinds of neuroscience here with left brain, right brain, right? Chaos. But when we're in that space, we tend to not be able to see the light.
Very true.
We tend to focus and narrow that focus down, and that's all we see is the problem or the issue or whatever. And it's hard to be able to pull back and get that broader perspective, kind of open yourself up to more things that might be able to fix some of those things. Um, but yeah, I think that's a really valuable lesson to understand that. And when we understand that about our brain and we find ourselves talking in that loop, right? That negative loop or making those problems really big. Um, when we understand that, then we have a better ability to pull that lever and say, hey, wait, hold on, right? What am I missing here? Do I really want to talk to myself that way? Is it really this bad? What can I do to create that space and grace?
Yes, I love that. I love what you just said. Is it really this bad?
Mm-hmm.
And again, depending on, where you are
Situation.
in the stressful situation, it just depends.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you're right, Amy. I think that we do have that opportunity once we start really becoming aware of like giving ourselves that space and grace and not having the guilt and the shame and all of that stuff come in.
I just love the idea of becoming a safe place for yourself.
Hmm.
Not because you never need to change, but because you don't have to be cruel to yourself in order to grow.
Yeah. So that's a really important point, right? Because the inner voice can be honest. It just doesn't have to be harsh and mean. I think that that's the important piece there, right? Is we start talking about like, well, so what does it look like to give us that grace, ourselves that grace? What does it look like? And so it might sound something like, hey, I am human and I was doing the best that I could. I did my best. And I think we all usually come in doing our best.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is so true. I mean, I think most days people wake up and they say to themselves, today's going to be a great day. I'm going to be my best person. I'm going to show up. I think most of us, all of us give the percentage that we have to give at the moment we have to give that.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that is not always 100%.
Yes, you're right.
I mean, it's just not.
Sometimes a good day is getting 30% in there.
I've had dishes in the sink for 3 days because I physically was like, I hate unloading the dishwasher. I'm not doing it. And I literally just was like, I was like, I'm not doing it. I mean, no one's going to know. So
yeah.
I did finally do it today. Anyways, yes.
Isn't it funny the things we'll talk ourselves out of that would take us like 3 minutes to do?
Yes. I would rather go run 3 miles than unload the dishwasher. I don't know what it is. I think it's as a child.
Yeah.
Did your mom leave you a list of chores to do on the back of an envelope?
Not on the back of an envelope, but I had my chores, yeah.
Okay. Well, that also shows like our age of, back in the day, your parents would just grab whatever they could to ride on or, but yeah, just brings back PTSD.
We can work on that if you want.
Don't show me the back of an envelope and put chores on it. And then I had 2 older sisters, and what do you think they did? They made me do everything.
Amy has to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else have that? Let us know in the comments.
I love that. Yeah. So giving ourselves grace really allows us to say, now that I know more, now that I know better, I can do it differently. It might ask us to acknowledge the truth and we don't have to collapse underneath it, for sure. So there's a lot of things that if we think about grace that would extend to others, how different that would be to extend that same level of grace to ourselves.
I think grace also kind of lets you say, oh, this has happened to me a lot. But that wasn't my best moment without turning it into I'm a terrible person.
Yes.
Because a lot of times we all fall short, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all have times when I just wish I could just grab those words back and put that back in my pocket or in my mouth or in my text. And so I think that's also having the ability to kind of give yourself grace.
Yeah. Sometimes you're just overwhelmed, right? Or you're overcommitted. I think that's a big one for us is that being overcommitted. So many things on the calendar or the list to do. And then you can start getting resentful about it. It's kind of like,
Definitely.
Well, why am I doing this? Or why am I have the responsibility to have to stop by, right? That voice comes in and starts talking. I think it's also easy when we're in that overwhelm to fall back into our old patterns. We're really trying to build and create a different way to respond, a different way to think, and a different way of how we're wanting to set up and live our lives. But when your brain is overwhelmed and overcommitted, you're going to fall back into those old patterns. This is grace right here. It is normal when we're making changes and putting in new habits and new ways of being to take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back.
Sure.
And the trick is to not let that 1 step back seem like a failure or a reason to just give up, right? Oh, I just messed that all up. So I don't even know why I'm doing it. To not do that and maybe even take that and say, well, why did this happen? Or how did I allow myself to get back? And I don't mean that accusingly, but how did I allow myself to get back there? What was I letting come in that caused me to have that step back? What can I learn from it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I was gonna say something that you brought up such a great point, but as we all know at our age, we sometimes forget what we're thinking. So we'll just move
come
on.
back.
Yeah,
It'll come back. Yeah, for sure. So, and I think rest for me, I don't know if this resonates with you, but we tend to get so little rest a lot of the time because we're constantly, I'm going to take myself back maybe a couple years, constantly overcommitting, making sure I needed to get things done, making choices like babysitting your grandchildren until 3 in the morning, that really cuts into your rest. And rest is such a huge lever for me. And I talked about it with the body. I talked about it with the mind, but even with what we're talking about with the spirit, that rest is such a big thing because when I am rested, I just think better. I just have a better attitude. I think that that's a really important one for women to think about if they're giving their body the rest that they need.
I love, yes, rest for sure, but also decompression time.
Yes.
My daughter and I talked about this, that we both, the best time for us to decompress is when everybody's gone to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And we can literally kind of just do, okay, what do I want to do? Whether it's surf the net, shop, or whatever, but allowing yourself that space to decompress or whatever makes you happy, right?
Yeah.
But finding that space, whether it's early morning, maybe you want to get up and do it at 4 a.m. I'm not a morning person, so I tend to do it after most people have gone to bed, but just allowing yourself that space to decompress. But yes, rest is so critical. And I mean, the older you get, what is it though that, I know hormones, I know age, but it just sometimes seems like there is different times in life that I've gone through that it's been harder to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gotten older, it definitely, I'm sure hormones is some of it. But
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Just your change in your body can lend to that. But I really think that, like you said, surf the web and things like that. So I get that is part of our society now, and I know that there's a huge difference if I take time to, maybe read instead
Mhm.
of being on my phone. If I'm working, like the other night, I was working right up until like 8, 9 o'clock, something like that. It greatly affects my quality of
Mm,
sleep. And I know that because of my ring, right? Of my aura, it will tell me where my HRVs are and things like
mhm.
that. And I know on those nights that I'm using my brain to work and problem solve and all that. And I think it's the energy that you expend and then not giving yourself the time to truly decompress.
Right.
Mindlessness is not decompression. So mindlessly scrolling.
Mm,
I like to do the little
that
art
little, yeah.
color on my phone, but I'll be doing that and my aura will say, you're stressed at the moment. I'm thinking, why am I stressed? But
Really?
I think it's the impact of like using your brain, figuring it out kind of stuff,
Okay.
rather than just being, rather than
Mhm,
just having some quiet time to yourself with your thoughts or breathing or taking a bath or maybe even going for a gentle walk,
mhm.
whatever it is that allows you to truly let your brain just kind of breathe and not keep demanding it.
So you got to figure out what works best for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, maybe that'll be another episode. We'll talk
Yes.
about sleep. Oh, I know what I was going to say.
See, I knew
It
it'd come back.
was that as we're talking about grace,
Hmm.
we're coming into the holidays. And
Yes.
this is going to be really important during the holidays. Like I was
Hmm.
thinking about this the other day because we're already talking about who's going to host Christmas and who's going to host Halloween and who's going to host Thanksgiving. And it's like, I'm getting stressed just thinking about that.
Yes.
So yes, grace as we go into the
Yeah.
holidays, but we'll wrap back around to that as we
I
get
think,
closer.
yeah, and I think we definitely need to have that be part of our conversation, because there are a lot of responsibilities and obligations, which are two different things. Responsibilities and obligations are two
Yes,
different things. But so we've kind of gone on to talking about what we can do in our body, our mind is to show ourselves that self-compassion. But it's like, where does that self-compassion, how does that connect to being the spirit, right? How does that connect to that? So we need to think about how do we tie that in so that we can grow spiritually, which we talked about our intuition, our knowing, that inner knowing of ourselves, of being quiet enough to hear and not just keep running ramshot over what we know to be the best or what we are feeling in our body to be the best. If we believe that humans are worthy of compassion, and I think we all do, then we have to include ourselves in that belief, right?
definitely. So how would you connect grace to your spirit? It's a good question,
It's,
right? Like so
yeah.
for our listeners, like how do you connect? How would you yourself out
Hmm.
there listening connect grace to spirit? And a lot of times when we talk about spirit, we're not always talking about religion. We've
Right.
talked about that. We have talked about that several times, that I'm not saying that it couldn't be a part of spirit, but we are definitely, allow yourself to interpret it the way that you see fit for
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, a religious practice is a part of many people's spirituality. And I would say that also a consideration of our spirituality is where our deepest values lie, where our deepest intuition lies, where our deepest knowing lies. So it encompasses all of that. Um, and I would say, that if that grace ties into that, the self-compassion is what you asked, right? Grace ties into that self-compassion in how we choose to take care of ourselves, that knowing of what is best for me. And sometimes that isn't always what's best for everybody else. And I think that's where we have the guilt that comes in. That's where we feel a little shame because maybe we feel like we should have done that when someone asked us. So grace to me really ties in our ability to speak our truth in a loving, kind way, both to other people and to ourselves as well.
I think you just hit something on the head that I hadn't ever really thought of, is that a mother's guilt sometimes is felt as shameful, which that's really interesting to me. Like when I think of something that I felt guilty about, it could almost be shame, which is, I mean, that's very interesting to me. So, okay,
So, well, wait, hold on. Don't go so fast.
okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's the connection there for you?
I don't know. I don't know that I'd have to, that's what I'm sitting here thinking right now. I'm like, I'm going to have to ponder on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether it's shameful for getting divorced or shameful for working 3 jobs when you have your kids and you're trying to make ends meet, whether it's shameful that we're just going to grab McDonald's on the way home and I'm not going to go home and cook because I'm exhausted from working 3 jobs from being a single mom. I mean, the list of guilt and shame can just go on if you allow it to.
Yeah. But I think it's important to take a look at that, however you want to do it in your own time or whatever, because guilt is a belief that you've done something wrong.
Okay.
Right. So I've done something wrong. So I feel guilty because I've done something wrong, whether intentional or not. Shame is one of the most debilitating emotions that we can have as people because it's a much deeper level than I've just done something wrong. Shame is more of a reflection on my value. So if you think about having guilt because you divorced or guilt because as a single mom you had to work. And I'm relating with you right here, right? I mean, because you do see how it affects and impacts your children as they're growing up. You do see how it molds them, right? It molds them. So where does that grace come in to be able to go, this was what I needed to do for me in a way so that I could be healthy, and then how do I take care of my kids? Right. I mean, we can go backwards a lot, right?
Yeah.
We can go backwards
Whole nother
a lot.
episode.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think giving yourself grace to sit with it, talk to yourself like you would talk to your friend and say, this was where you were at that place in your life. This is what you needed to be healthy. I left my children for 6 months to go to CHP Academy, and there could be a lot of guilt around that. They were little, they were 3 and 5, and they stayed with their dad. And I know that at the time it marked them. I know that not having their mom for 6 months was very hard. I mean, I went home on the weekends and I went home on a Wednesday night when I could, but I also recognized in hindsight that is how I took care of my kids. That is how I provided for them and made sure that they had a solid home to grow up in, to take care of them and have the money to do that. So, I think being able to sit with that reflection and not allow the guilt to come in, but to really see the true picture of this is where I was in my life and this is why I had to do that. And I'm going to give myself grace around that piece.
I think what you just said is great for the listeners, which is talk to yourself the way you talk to a friend.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like a great point
Yeah.
for us to almost close out on. I don't think we're closing
Yeah.
out yet.
Not quite yet. Not quite yet. Absolutely. So, we have to love ourselves. And I think that being spiritually mature, really being connected to our spirit, that part of us, and allowing ourselves to truly love ourselves in the way that we would love our child or someone who's super dear to us is definitely a mature, growing spiritual place to be.
And learning to unconditionally love yourself.
Yes.
Right. I mean, some days I'm like, man, I'm killing it. Some days I'm like, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
So I think that the part that gets me the most is that we can believe in grace, we can talk about grace, and we can offer grace, and we still struggle to receive it ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. And I think maybe part of that spiritual growth is learning to stop excluding ourselves from the grace that we say we believe in.
Maybe one simple way to practice this is to ask, what would I offer someone else I love in this same moment?
Yeah. That's a great question
Yeah.
to hold out there.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
that is a great question because if all of a sudden you're finding yourself feeling like super disappointed in yourself, pause and take a breath. Take a sip of your yummy, yummy.
Delicious pear.
That is so good. Imagine sitting in front of yourself as someone that
Oh
you
my
love
goodness.
deeply.
Wow.
What would you want?
Wow. I love that.
Yeah, what would you want if you were sitting down and you're facing yourself? Mirror work is excellent. Mirror work is excellent to just stand in front of a mirror because usually in front of a mirror, we're doing our hair, we're putting our makeup on, we're brushing our teeth, right? Whatever. But to just stand and look at yourself in the eyes.
I'm going to try it.
Yeah. And ask,
Okay.
what do I need? What do I need right now? What do I want? And just noticing the different things about what's your tone with yourself, asking yourself, like, is there just a little small piece of comfort that I can give you now, or a little small piece of trust, or a little small piece of recognition? Sometimes we just need to recognize all that we do. And when we start making that list of all that we do and all that we did, then those little things that maybe didn't get done aren't quite so big.
Sometimes you just have to be your own cheerleader.
Mm-hmm.
Got to practice that.
Yeah, I think you have to be your own cheerleader all the time. Which I think that too can maybe sound kind of selfish or egotistical or "God, you're so good, Amy, right? You are a rock star, right?" And sometimes that can feel like, I'm kind of being egotistical, or that little voice will go, "No, I'm not," or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think we really do have to be our own cheerleader and advocate. Yeah. Be in the corner for ourselves. So just being soft with ourselves, just looking at sometimes self-compassion really begins by borrowing the voice that we already know how to use with others.
I think that feels pretty doable. Not forcing myself to suddenly feel completely different, but asking, can I speak to myself with even a little more care?
Yes, absolutely. So as always, we always give you the opportunity to have a reflection and a weekly invitation. This is not homework. We're not giving you something else to do, but if you find time to put it in your space, we would love that.
So as we close today, just a few things. When someone else is tired, what do you say to them? When someone else is learning, how do you encourage them? When someone else makes a mistake, how do you help them find their way back?
Yes. And then just gently ask yourself, can I offer myself even a small measure of that same grace? This is just really a way of remembering your humanity, and you deserve the same compassion that you would give someone else.
And some things you can say to yourself might be, I'm learning, I can repair this, I'm allowed to need rest. That was hard and I'm still here. I don't have to shame myself to grow. Just a few things that, positive things you can say to yourself.
Yeah. And I think what I really love, that deeper question we just touched on, is what would I offer someone I love in the same moment? And if we can put ourselves face to face, looking at ourselves and saying, what can I offer you? What can I give you? And just see if you can offer that to yourself.
And please remember that self-compassion is actually also a sign of strength.
Absolutely.
Not just because it avoids the hard things, but because it allows us to meet hard things without abandoning ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that is the deeper invitation right there, to be honest without feeling like we're being harsh, and to allow ourselves to offer ourselves the grace that we so freely give everybody else.
All right. So we're going to close out with, you'll find this week's Lavender Pear Grace Fizz recipe and companion resource in the link below. You can also join our community at www.balanceandbubblespodcast.com, where you'll receive updates on upcoming events, live calls, and more.
Yes. And if you are enjoying the podcast, which we really hope you are, please like, subscribe, and share it with a friend or a group of women that you think would love to be a part of this conversation. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
And until next time, come as you are,
reset often, and we'll see you next week.